Welcome aboard the Athletics Can't Wait Jets podcast, your nonstop shop for all things Jets with Tim McMaster, Zack Rosenblatt, and Marissa Dunn.
Can't wait.
The NFL spring season in the books. The league enters the closest thing that it has to a downtime for the next month or so before teams crank things up for training camp. We're wrapping up mini camps, both optional and mandatory, who's looked good, who hasn't. And the bigger story this week, who's there, who isn't. Thanks for joining the Can't Wait podcast. Thrilled to have you here, whether you're watching us on YouTube or checking out the audio version after the fact. I'm Tim McMaster, along with Zack Rosenblatt, our Jets reporter at The Athletic, and Marissa Dunn doing her best Aaron Rodgers impersonation today, skipping the episode to go on a trip. That's right. She's not here.
Yeah, we have to be vague about. We have to be vague about it as well. So it's
right, we can't talk about it.
Yeah.
We can say that she did talk to us ahead of time, it was cleared. I'm not going to talk about whether or not she could be fined. I mean, we'll get into that.
This is an excused absence. I'll say it's not unexcused.
All right, you're gonna give her.
I'll give her an excused. Yeah, I think it's excused. When people find out the reason, they'll know why it's excused. I'll say.
Now, what about you and the fact that you weren't at practice today?
So before I say this, I just want to say, like, if Aaron wants some advice on the next time he plans on skipping practice, just say your dog had diarrhea and it got all over your house. That's what me, because then I think that would be very relatable for me specifically, but I think anyone with a dog would get it. Because I got home from my apartment after practice yesterday. It was not a pretty sight, not a pretty scene in there, as they say.
Do you have rug?
We have hard floors. We do have a carpet. Luckily, she didn't go on the carpet. She did go on the couch. She did go on the couch. I think we were able to clean it. And it's got some, trails everywhere else. Not to get too graphic. It gets worse, actually. So
my dog never had diarrhea, but did vomit. And
yeah, this is the only second time. She's an 11-year-old dog. The only second time this ever happened. She's still in great health. She's been fine otherwise. So I was a little concerned because she is older. But yeah. So she had been dealing with this for a couple of days. I thought she was in the clear. It seemed like she was, and then clearly she wasn't. And so last night, because my parents have a yard and it's easier, like in a pinch, to go out in the backyard than it is to go on an elevator down 5 flights of stairs at my apartment, I decided to drive down to Cherry Hill, New Jersey, hour and a half. About 20 minutes into the drive, a little more came out in the car, so had to pull over. Not a fun night. Yeah, this is a very duty-heavy podcast. Anyway, the point being, I am in my parents' basement right now, like the old days of this pod where I used to have to do that. I would forget my mic because I have to supervise my dog. So she doesn't poop everywhere. And so I wasn't able to make it to the practice today. Unfortunately, it was not a trip that I was happy to be on, is what I would say. Whereas I think Aaron Rodgers is fine with the trip that he is on.
Yeah, exactly. Which we won't get specific about. But speaking of duty, potty training at this household coming up this weekend. So I may be cleaning up all sorts of stuff as well. We'll see. Just to bring this full circle.
Yeah.
All right.
Full circle.
So obviously we kid and we joke, but it all relates back to Aaron Rodgers. For anyone who hasn't been paying attention, is just tuning into our podcast for the latest information on the Jets. Aaron Rodgers missing mandatory minicamp this week after attending all the voluntary minicamps. Robert Saleh probably fueled the fire a little bit yesterday just by all the information he shared. So Rodgers not there. It's fine, according to the team. He let them know no big issue here, except it is unexcused, which means he could be fined. And then we'll get into Haason Reddick, who is also not there. But starting with Rodgers, Zack, this is another situation. I talk about it all the time with the Jets that just feels like there's like 100 different ways it could have been better. Like, schedule mandatory minicamp at different time, make Aaron Rodgers change his travel plans, get ahead of the story. Maybe that's number one. Get ahead of the story.
Yes, I think, I guess we don't know exactly when he told the Jets. Saleh alluded to it being before OTAs. So I guess they maybe wouldn't have changed the schedule. I don't know, like how long before or whatever.
Well, I think I'm not just holding the Jets responsible.
Like,
no blame on Rodgers here, right?
Yeah, we'll get to that. But, in terms of like the messaging, this wouldn't. So Rodgers is at a place right now. Jets fans, I think, still support him, even if some of them maybe are tired of like the drama that follows, whether it's deserved or not in their eyes. But the biggest thing is like when this stuff happens, everybody nationally is just dying to jump on Aaron Rodgers. Like it's like they crave it to a degree that is like hard to even comprehend. Like I thought I knew like things that would blow up with him, but it seems like I can't even predict it anymore because I'm not sure. In the moment, like when maybe because I was surprised about it, like when Saleh revealed that he was one of the two that were unexcused, like I didn't process how much it was going to blow up because of who Aaron Rodgers is. But yeah, ultimately, if they had known for a while, like they said, getting ahead of it would have been the right move because then it would have died down by now. I think it wouldn't have been as crazy of a reaction. You can emphasize while Rodgers is there that he's been to every single OTA practice, which is accurate. And as I wrote in the column today, I think two things can be true at once. I think on one hand, the fact that he's skipping mandatory minicamp, it's not a great look. And it's fair to criticize him for it. I mean, you look around the NFL, there's not a single other starting quarterback that skipped mandatory minicamp. That's true. It is fair to criticize him for that, especially as leader of the team, blah, blah, blah. On the flip side, I don't think it's as big of a deal as everybody is making it out to be. Number one, he was there for all of OTAs, which other quarterbacks weren't. I believe Lamar Jackson didn't go to all of them. I believe there were maybe Dak Prescott didn't. I think there were like a few guys that didn't go to every OTA. And that's the minicamp and OTAs. What they do in the practices is not different. It's just one of them is mandatory and the other isn't. And so there was a lot of like Jets players that were like a lot of the defensive line wasn't there for outside of Reddick. They weren't there for the voluntary portion. Anyway, the point being, and I think that this is the most important point, they're not going to win or lose any games in September because Rodgers didn't show up for 2 light practices with no hitting and no pads. Like, I think ultimately the fact that this has become a distraction is the bigger issue. The actual like content of his decision is not that important. Even though, this isn't it's an unexcused absence because it's not like a family issue. It's not something that he needed to be at necessarily. It's something that he's choosing to be at instead of at practice. And so, I think that's why you're seeing a lot of the Nash people lose their mind. Whereas locally you're seeing maybe a little more support for him, not on like the radio stations and stuff like that, but like in terms of the fan base, I'm a little down the middle. Like I said, I think there's fair criticism there, but I also think it's overblown as most things are with Aaron. I think there's plenty of things you can criticize Aaron Rodgers for. And you can criticize him for this, by the way. I just mean there's like non-football things that he's talking about or doing this.
Right.
Anyway, like that's like controversial, I should say. Like this isn't controversial. It's unique, and there's not many quarterbacks that would do this, if any. And I know people have pointed out that Tom Brady was gone for like a week of training camp when he was at the Bucs to deal with personal stuff. Everybody has their thing. So ultimately,
well, and we eventually learned, right, that was
it was
kind of serious
marital,
personal stuff.
Yeah. But anyway, the point being, like, this is the Jets, this is Aaron Rodgers, so everything's going to be amplified, and the Jets could have avoided it by just doing better messaging. Like Robert Saleh, the way he's called it an event, and the way he said if it's important to him, it's important to us, but also said that it's an unexcused absence, which means they're like he went out of his way to say that. By the way, he wasn't asked if it's unexcused, so Robert made the decision to tell us that. It's very possible that we would have followed up and asked if this was an excused absence. I don't know that for 100% certain. Because again, in the moment, we didn't really know that, we didn't know the context as well, I guess. But yeah, so it's just, kind of bumbling all around in terms of the messaging, which led to all this drama, which is another distraction in an offseason where Saleh has emphasized that he wants everything to be quiet. And we're going into this long break where this is the last thing that everybody's going to remember, unfortunately, in addition to the other Reddick part that we're going to talk about. But,
well, Aaron Rodgers also said he wanted everything to be quiet.
Yeah. Which again, as I pointed out in my column, like that's going to come up now every single time.
Every time.
And there's as I wrote in, there's going to be plenty more opportunities for that to come out. That quote is going to be resurfaced over and over and over again. He somewhat backtracked on it a couple weeks ago, but nobody's going to remember that part. So
but when he backtracked, right, he said, "I meant during the season."
Yeah.
Or when we're on the field.
Yeah.
Well, that's what this is,
exactly.
Right? This is a mandatory minicamp. This is when you're supposed to be on the field. So.
Yep. So again, this is just, I don't think this happens to other teams. This kind of drama. I just don't. So, we're going to hopefully move on from this pretty soon. I know that's kind of like leading the talk cycle right now, the talk show cycle, ESPN, radios, WFAN, this podcast, Twitter, like it's everywhere. You kind of have fans get mad sometimes when we address something like this, but like it's a topic that everybody's talking about. So I'm not going to ignore it. I'm going to write about it. And so I wrote that column giving my opinion on the matter, which we just talked about at length here. But it's just an annoying thing that has no impact on what's going to happen this season, unless his teammates were upset about it, which only people that know that are in that building. I haven't heard anything coming out of it. I don't think they care. I mean, Breece Hall didn't seem to care. Maybe there's some guys that are like, okay, well, he gets to do that. Why can't I? Kind of thing. But he's getting fined
because he's a 4-time MVP and a future Hall of Fame. That's the thing. Like, just real quick, like they could have just excused it. And it sounded like the reason for not excusing it is like you don't want to set a precedent for other players. Maybe, I don't know, maybe. But there are other players around the league that were excused this week and mispractice. But like, I don't buy that, because like there's no precedent when it's involving like the MVP quarterback who's headed to the Hall of Fame and has been playing in this league for whatever 18 years. You know what I mean? Like that's like when the second year player comes up to you and says like, well, you let Aaron miss time. You say, yeah, that's Aaron. Like when you're that, you can miss time.
So what, and maybe Saleh's trying to make a point that Aaron doesn't run the team as much as everybody seems to think he does. Like maybe that was the goal here. But to our initial point, like if Robert comes out a week or two ago and says we're excusing or whatever before minicamp, the beginning of minicamp, whenever he would have wanted to give the message, Aaron had a prior commitment, and so we decided to excuse him so he doesn't have to come to minicamp. I think nobody would have. Maybe some national people would have still like found a way to criticize it, but I think that would have been the way I would have handled it personally. I don't know if there's any right way to handle Aaron Rodgers related things, but I don't think this was the right one. So I don't know if we have much more to say on that topic, but I just think, it's just nonstop annoying drama. And hopefully as we get to this off-season part of the off-season that it quiets down a bit.
Yeah, I think we've worn out the topic because everyone's already heard all this too.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so the other guy that's missing is actually more noteworthy. Haason Reddick. We haven't specifically heard that he wants a new contract, but like I think it's pretty safe to assume at this point.
On the record, at least, yeah.
On the right. Pretty safe. And if anybody hears the drilling, I apologize. I don't know. There's been no drilling for months. They picked this moment, but anyway,
of course.
In my apartment. But Reddick, missing the time, obviously. Also, we assume he wants a new contract. He's obviously underpaid right now. That's been something we've talked about plenty. $14.25 million in the final year of that deal that he outplayed with the Eagles. That's why the Eagles traded him, was because they didn't want to pay him.
Yeah.
Let's start here, and we'll get to Reddick actually weighing in a little bit today. But let's start with, like, is it your belief, Zach, that like the Jets making that trade didn't see this as being an issue, that they just thought he would play out the contract?
I think they obviously knew that the reason why the Eagles were willing to trade him was because he wanted more money. So I imagine they knew there was inherent risk bringing a guy in who wanted more money, and then they bring him in, and their plan was not to give him that money, at least initially. Like that was not the idea. Was they're going to let him play out the year, and then if it went as well as it could, either throw him an extension by the end of the year or in the off season or whatever it may be. But he's 30 years old. Joe Douglas, I believe, has only given an extension to one guy, 29 or older, and that was Ryan Griffin, who got like a 3-year, $9 million deal. And I don't even think he made it to the end of those 3 years, or I can't remember exactly. I have to look that up. But anyway, I mean, that's Ryan Griffin. He's a backup tight end. So it's not, and generally, I think that's something he probably learned, especially from Howie Roseman, who really doesn't give out contracts at 30 plus unless they're like, absolute stars, which you could argue Reddick is, but guys like Lane Johnson, Jason Peters over the years, Fletcher Cox, like other than that, Howie historically always let guys go before they hit their downswing of their career. And so Haason, he does have some leverage. The Jets gave up stuff to get him. They clearly need him. They traded away JFM because they got Haason Reddick and they cannot afford to keep JFM anymore, is what Joe Douglas told us. You let Bryce Huff walk. And so all you have behind Haason Reddick is essentially Will McDonald. And he's a guy who's very unproven. So he knows the value already he has to this team. But yeah, my impression just from talking to people in and out of the building is that he's traded to the team. He communicates to them that he's going to show up for the offseason program, that he's excited to be there.
He said that. I mean, he's kind of said all those things.
Yeah.
Like,
that he's, yeah. And And the Jets, I don't know how clear they made it, but I think they made it clear that they were not going to be in a rush to give him a new deal. He made it clear that he wants a new deal. Like, those two things are true. And so and then the part that, has maybe made Haason look worse is that, by all accounts, at least according to Saleh, again, this is Saleh's choice to share this information with us. He told people he was going to show up, and then he didn't communicate with anybody, and he didn't show up. And then Saleh finally communicated with him, like, after OTAs, he said, which Saleh initiated. So, and Haason, for what it's worth, a New York Post reporter, Ryan Dunleavy, went to a community event he had in Camden, New Jersey on Saturday, and was given the chance to address any of this, and he declined to talk to anybody. He's declined interview requests from others. And so, he's had chances to address this publicly, and he's chosen to, like, just let the narrative run and let what the Jets say run. And he hasn't spoken, and he's perfectly capable of tweeting or reaching out to a reporter or getting set up with one. So, I mean, this is going to your point you're about to make with the tweet, but yeah, ultimately, like, it didn't play out like I think either the Jets or I expected, but I don't think it should come as a complete surprise because he was going to do this in Philadelphia.
Right. It was his plan. Maybe he had vacation plans. Who knows? Anyway, here's the tweet from today from Haason Reddick, which we can just get into how frustrating this is from a journalistic standpoint. But he said, "Stop believing the foolery y'all see on these social media apps and news outlets, running crazy narratives and y'all eating it up." Okay, fine. But you had the chance to end the narratives and create your own narrative when somebody asked you for a comment and you didn't give it. And beyond that, like, you have a Twitter account. Like, this tweet doesn't give us any more information and doesn't fix the problem at all. Like, if you don't want the crazy narratives out there, then just tweet the truth. Like, just send a tweet that says whatever your stance is and why you're not there and all that. Like, it's, anyway, I'm frustrated. I can only imagine how frustrated you are, Zach.
Yeah. It's more just the context of that tweet. It's annoying. Like, I have nothing against Haason. Based on his intro
I'm not.
And,
I don't mean it like
it's more than just the message. I mean, he's not the first.
I just mean, like,
player to ever
you had a
this,
chance. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's the point I was about to make, though. Like, within this tweet, he didn't actually say which narrative he is a crazy one and that he doesn't agree with. Like, is he denying that he's holding out for a new contract? Is he denying that the Jets told him they weren't going to give him a new deal? Is he denying that he told people in the building that he was going to be there in the offseason program? Like, what is this all about ultimately? Like,
here's the thought.
This was an opportunity to say,
maybe the tweet's not even about him. Maybe it's about Aaron Rodgers.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that'd be funny. That makes me think of forget which player it was. There was a guy in the Sun. Oh, I think it was Eric Gordon, or no, not Eric Gordon. I'm blanking. There was a Suns player who wanted to get traded, and he tweeted something like, "I need to get out of here." And then his explanation later on was like, I was at a barbershop and I needed to get out of getting my hair cut. That made me think of that. But, ultimately what will probably happen, if I was going to predict, is that they come to some sort of agreement where they add incentives onto his contract. So it doesn't really necessarily add to his cap hit as much as, if you play as well as you say you can, then you're going to make X amount of money more. I don't anticipate a 2-year deal or an extension on his current contract. So we'll see. If that's what he's demanding, will he hold out in training camp and take the fines? Like, that would be fascinating to see, but we're not going to know that until training camp. So if it's going to resolve itself, that would be my guess. Or he just shows up and plays through his deal. Ultimately, like, his money isn't technically guaranteed right now it's just his salary, and it's after the trade, it's not guaranteed, but I mean, they're going to pay him. So yeah, it's something that's going to be one of the key storylines going into camp, because he's one of the more important players, you could argue, because I think Jermaine Johnson is probably the better overall players because he's a good run stopper too, and I think he can slide inside now a little bit. But Haason Reddick's a superstar pass rusher, and they brought him here to make an impact this year. So
Mojo Jets says in the chat, "Am I the only one that doesn't think
it might not
this is a big deal?" And maybe it's not, but here's the thing: like, building team chemistry, right? And they're beyond, like, he doesn't need to be in there to, like, get into shape or whatever it is. But a new guy on a team that has very young pass rushers that could definitely learn from him, like, it matters.
Yeah. It does. Yeah. I mean, and he's a new player. Like, how do his teammates feel about the fact that he hasn't reported yet? Like, I don't know. I mean, maybe they don't care ultimately. They probably, if he shows up and he balls out, they won't care. But this is a team that needs to win this year, and they can't really afford all of these distractions. So the Jets do not have a lot of money to work with, for what it's worth. They have $6 million in cap space right now. They traded away, like I said, they traded away JFM because they could not afford him. They basically handed him to the Broncos and said, "Here you go. Here's a really good player for basically free." And so if they even wanted to give Haason more money, they need to either cut someone or restructure some contracts. And you're pushing more money into the future, which they already have a lot of money into the future.
Can you just is there a way to restructure his deal and giving him a new one that actually saves you money this year? Kicking it down the road.
I think there probably is a way to do that, but they probably would have to extend them. I think there's maybe a way to convert a salary to a signing bonus, which makes it guaranteed, and then you can push some money down the road. But I don't know if he just wants that money right now, or if he wants more money, which I'm guessing it's the latter. So yeah, I don't know. It's just something that we're going to keep an eye on for sure.
All right. So those are the guys that aren't there this week or weren't there this week. We should talk about the guys that were. And one guy that benefited from Aaron Rodgers not being there was Tyrod Taylor, the Jets' legitimate backup quarterback.
Yeah.
We're just going to keep saying that's going to be like his title, like legitimate backup quarterback. I know you weren't there today, Zach, but you were there yesterday to check him out. Just talk about, what you saw from Tyrod Taylor this week.
You see the Tyrod experience, how it is when he plays quarterback, because I think he's someone that I think he's got I think people don't realize how good of a deep ball he throws. He throws a really good deep ball. It's pretty accurate, and he has really good arm strength. He's mobile, but also you see like kind of the downside with him has always been he holds on to the ball a little too long, which leads to him getting hit, which leads to a lot of injuries. And so I think we saw a lot of him holding on to the ball and that kind of thing. And I think there was some inaccuracy in short intermediate areas, but ultimately he's better than any of their backups were last year. He's better than Zach Wilson was in this setting these last couple of years. So I think you feel a lot better at Tyrod there than maybe if Rodgers goes down and you have to play Zach Wilson and Trevor Siemian again. Like ultimately Tyrod is better than all those guys. You do have some concerns about his ability to stay healthy, but I think that Tyrod is a solid quarterback. He had a much better day by all accounts today. I think he has some chemistry. Maybe I should stop saying chemistry with Garrett Wilson, because I think you just have chemistry with him because he's so good.
He's just that good.
You just throw the ball in his general region and he'll catch it. But he does seem to have some chemistry with him. He played with Mike Williams early in his career with the Chargers, which is notable and interesting if Tyrod has to play and whenever Mike Williams comes back. But yeah, I think you feel good about him. I do wonder if they bring a third quarterback in of relevance. I don't know how soon Jordan Travis is going to be ready. And, I don't know, maybe you don't need to prepare for the worst case scenario where two quarterbacks get injured, but the Jets
they definitely need to prepare for the worst case scenario.
I don't know, whoever it is, it doesn't need to be anybody like a barn burner, even if it's just a veteran on the practice squad. But I don't know, because Tyrod has injury questions. Aaron obviously has injury questions, and Jordan Travis is coming off a broken leg. So
you only have to look back to last year, right?
Yeah.
Tyrod Taylor being the backup quarterback, and then suddenly the Giants on their third string.
Tommy DeVito.
And the legend was born, though. So we talk the Taylor. You got to see Rodgers at the OTAs, obviously, which is, laid back stuff. But, as far as his progress coming back from the Achilles, like just how did it look? Did it look like OTA Aaron Rodgers a year ago?
Yeah, it did. And I have something coming out tomorrow of like my overall takeaways, like coming out of this session or this part of the season. And the biggest thing is like, it's too early to say that he's like back. But he looks like Aaron Rodgers. Like he's always going to shine in a practice setting where he can't get hit because he has such elite, throwing ability and such elite accuracy and ability to get it in tight windows and do all these amazing things. But as I've said on this podcast throughout the spring, and it ultimately comes down to how is he going to do when he gets hit, and how is he going to do like when he has to move around? Like, is he going to have mobility? And we saw there was one play in OTAs where he got out of the pocket. Obviously they can't hit him, so it's not quite real pressure, but got out of the pocket and then found Xavier Gibson on the opposite side of the field for like a 60-yard touchdown. Like that was, if that's what it's going to be this season, then you feel really good. But I'm not ready to say he's fully back because I don't know that. And I don't know that I'll know that until we see him in week 1, or if he plays in a preseason game, or maybe in the joint practices. But when he's running around for his life, or when he's taking hits and he gets back up and he's still able to do what he does, then you feel good about it. But it's just so unpredictable right now. And I was kind of the same way talking about Breece Hall last year. Like, until I see him taking hits and getting back up and still having the speed he used to have, then I'm not sure when he's going to be Breece of old. And week 1, he had like an 80-yard run, and I was like, okay, so Breece Hall, he looks fine. He still was like getting his legs under him, but he looked fine. So Rodgers, he's obviously, even not at full strength, is the best quarterback they've had here in a long time. Like, that goes without saying. But I'm not ready to say he's back until we see, things speed up. Even if it's just watching him in pads and with the offensive line in front of him and all the offense around him and how he looks and stuff like that. But anyway, there's very good reason to get excited about this offense, I think, and Rodgers at the center of it. But we'll see what Aaron Rodgers at 40 coming off an Achilles looks when the games matter.
And we'll see if they can protect him, which is the next thing I wanted to get into as far as the offensive line goes. Obviously, Tyron Smith there. That's a big difference maker. But overall, how is the O-line looking in these practices? And also, like, do you get a feel for like him as a teammate and helping the other younger offensive linemen?
Tyron, I think he, maybe not a surprise, but I was mildly surprised that he participated in the entire offseason program. I think that is very telling about his work ethic and how much he cares about it. I think he's as advertised. I've never watched him like up close like this. Obviously, he's a big freak of nature in terms of like his size, like how cut he is. Like, he doesn't look, he's like very tall and strong, but he doesn't look like a typical offensive lineman. Like Rodgers joked, he doesn't have like the gut like David Bakhtiari does. I know that's his friend, but like he looks like someone that was, made out of clay and designed into the ideal offensive lineman. And when he's out there, he's absolutely dominant. But the reality with him is the maintenance thing is going to be real. He had a lot of veteran rest days throughout this session. He's going to have them all season. That's how the Cowboys got him through the year. But yeah, ultimately, I think his presence, and whether he's a vocal leader or if he's just a lead by example guy, I lean more towards probably that. It's going to work wonders for a guy, especially like Olu Fashanu, who got better as the session. I think he struggled a little in the beginning. I think he got better as this whole spring went along. And I think being around Tyron has been absolutely wonderful for him, and that's his hero. And I think that's going to be the biggest dividend of the Tyron signing is going to be how good Fashanu is in the coming years, I think. And so I think that's a beautiful thing. And the benefit, weirdly, and I believe we've talked about this, of Tyron taking those rest days is that Olu is going to get a lot of first team reps and a lot of reps with Aaron Rodgers, especially in training camp. And so you're not going to be throwing, Olu into the fire in the season without ever having practice with Aaron at any point this year, which I imagine he's going to be thrown in at some point. So, if Tyron can play 12 to 14 games and is healthy at the end, or healthy enough to play at the end of the season, I think that's a win. And you feel really good about that. If it's less than that, then maybe you're in a little bit of trouble. But if he's only missing a couple games and he's healthy at the end of the year, I think they're going to be in very good shape, because this guy's an absolute star. I very rarely saw anybody get by him. I just think he's a technician. You look at him in drills, and even just the way he does drills, it's just like you look at his footwork and everything just seems perfect. And then you watch like the rookies who are still learning, and like their stance is too wide, or they're punching out too soon, or whatever it is. Like, Tyron doesn't make mistakes, I don't think so. I think I didn't appreciate how good he was until I started seeing him live, I would say.
That happens with offensive.
Yeah, as Taylor Delgado just said, just to describe how much a freak he is, dude wears a knee brace on his elbow because they don't make elbow braces that big, which is true. And his hands are like, there's a photo the Jets tweeted of him holding a football, and the football looks like puny in his hands. It's wild.
It's like Shaq shooting free throws, right? It's just tiny.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into the rookies a little bit. You mentioned Fashanu. How much can you learn from OTAs, right, as far as an offensive lineman? I feel like you do get a little more out of the skill guys.
Yeah, and there's not as much hitting and stuff like that. But like I said, it's going to be a great test for Olu, especially when he's running first team, because that first team defensive line is obviously absolutely fantastic. So, Saleh told an anecdote about how they highlighted how Olu performed in Tuesday's practice in a team meeting today. because he stood out. He like just performed, and he clearly had shown so much improvement. And so I think that's a very, very good sign, because I think he kind of came in somewhat not like completely raw, because he got a decent amount of starts in college, but he is relatively new to football compared to a lot of these guys because he started later in life. So I think that there's signs of encouragement. It's good that he doesn't have to play right away, is what I would say as of right now, but he's gonna have to play at some point. But yeah, I'm encouraged, but it was up and down for sure, as it's going to be for a rookie offensive lineman.
Then the skill guys, Malachi, first of all.
Yeah, Malachi, I just to tease this out of my story coming, I don't know if we're publishing it today or tomorrow, actually, but my takeaways from the offseason, I think everybody kind of penciled Corley in as the wide receiver 3. I'd say like pump the brakes a little bit, because I think Xavier Gipson has something to say about it. He looked really good this time of the year, and he's clearly taken another step after having all the experience he has, whereas I think Malachi is still adjusting to NFL speed. He got banged up one day in OTAs. And I think the way he's going to thrive is when there's going to be tackling, when he can start breaking off and bouncing off guys, because that's his skill set, and that's not really what you do in this time of the year. So I'm not ready to evaluate him fully yet, but I think Xavier is ahead of him if I had to, handicap it in the wide receiver 3 race. But I still think Corley has the higher ceiling, obviously, and I think he's very talented. But I wouldn't count out Gipson yet.
And then the running backs. I think we talked about the running backs a little bit on the last one, but Braylon has shown that he could be that backup guy.
Yeah, I'd say it seems pretty clear to me that it's RB1, Breece Hall, RB2, Braylon Allen. I think the rest of the guys are fighting for RB3. Braylon is he's so big and he's such a strong runner, but his pass catching obviously has been the most impressive thing about him in this time of the year. And if he can bring that to the table, then you could spell Breece every now and then, maybe a little more than you would have. I'm sure there'll be an adjustment to the NFL, but I'm really, really high on Braylon. And I think he's going to be really, really good. And outside of that, I think Isaiah Davis had kind of a bumpy OTAs. He's a rookie, so I'm not like fully evaluating him or anything. There's still talent there, but I think, there were some missed assignments and some, fumbling of handoffs and stuff like that. Izzy got hurt on Tuesday. Before that, he wasn't really getting much work with the first team, and I'm not very confident. He has a lot to prove if he's going to make the team. Tariq Cohen's a guy they added later, who we talked about last episode. He's probably brought in more as a returner, but he does have some juice and some experience. And they have another guy, Xavier Valladay, who got way more reps than I would have expected, and he looked pretty good. I don't know if he's done enough to make the team, but I'd say the running back 3 is probably between Isaiah Davis, Izzy, Tariq Cohen, and him, unless they bring in somebody else, which is conceivable because this is not really a veteran group unless you count Tariq Cohen. So, but I'm very high on Braylon Allen. I think he's a very talented rookie.
Yeah, that'll be one of the good training camp battles. I think will be.
Yeah.
The third string.
Yeah, just to highlight one more rookie real quick before we move on. Quintez Stiggers, who we've talked about a lot on this podcast. I don't know if you were about to bring him up. Sorry.
That's right.
But he's been really, really impressive, frankly. Like they throw the backup defenders in against the first team sometimes. He's like locked down. I know people are going to laugh at this. He's locked down Allen Lazard at times. He had an interception today at the end of practice. He's impressed me quite a bit for a guy who's never played at this level and didn't play in college. I mean, the CFL is professional, so maybe I shouldn't be that surprised. But he's clearly got talent worth developing, and I'm very intrigued to see what his future holds. I think if he's a depth piece, that's going to be wind up being good, and it's going to be fun to watch him in training camp, and especially in those joint practices and in the preseason. He's going to be one of those preseason darlings as a late round pick, and it's fun to see him be as good as he is. Like clearly the Jets saw something, and I saw it in camp, and it's very early, but I think it's harder for defensive players to stand out this time of the year because there's no hitting, and I think he's done really, really well.
There's no real big examples of this, but I wonder how much of a benefit it is that this guy was a professional football player. He's not coming from the college ranks. He's actually coming from a professional league and in the CFL. And in some ways, he's probably, I mean, you could argue that being in the SEC would prepare you better than the CFL, but it is different being
He's
professional.
Playing grown men. He's playing grown men.
Right. Being a professional and what goes into that as far as preparation and time management and all the things can only help him.
It makes me, it's not to compare him to this because this guy's a star, but it reminds me of Luka Doncic when he was coming out because he was like a teenager playing in the professional leagues overseas. and he like won championships and stuff. And
won the Euros as like, I think 17-year-old.
And I think that there's a tendency, or used to be a tendency, of like when you're evaluating two prospects that you ding the white international guy because a lot of them have failed over the years in the NBA. Whereas I saw it as this guy's like dominating against guys that are a lot older than him and professional. And so I think he's going to do that in the NBA right away. And he did. So somebody brought back an old tweet I had about Luka, somebody who I know in Arizona, to be like, Zach knew what he was talking about back then. So I felt really good. One of the rare, like whatever the opposite of freezing cold takes is. I had one of those. So.
Red hot takes.
Anyway, so Quantas Stiggers.
Speaking of red hot, Dan Botter's on fire today.
Yeah.
Zach, your dog could lock down Lazard. I just had to throw
That's
that
rude. But yeah, I was gonna say, so Quantas Stiggers is the next Luka, is what I'm trying to say. So
let's sign up for that. And no pressure on him this year either, obviously, unless there's an injury. But the depth at corner would be great. All right. The one other thing we have on the rundown, recent tryouts, some interesting ones. Jakeem Grant, wide receiver, kick returner. Pat Eflin, offensive lineman, formerly of the New York Jets. And then Tack McKinley, defensive lineman. I love Tack.
Tackerist is the full name, yeah.
Takk is how it shortens up, which is cool. Interesting, guys.
Yeah, so I'll start with Grant. I think the Jets are throwing I think a lot of teams are doing this. Like the kick return rules have really adjusted how teams are approaching the special teams, which is kind of fun, honestly. It's like bringing another element into the game that kind of everybody has been ignoring the last few years because kick returns have not been a thing. But you have Xavier Gibson already, and you need multiple returners because, as Salah said, there's going to be like over 100 returns for every team this year. So you bring in Tariq Cohen, you bring Jakeem Grant in on the tryout, and both are very intriguing guys. Malachi Corley becomes a more interesting potential returner because of his ability to break tackles and all that stuff. So I'm very intrigued to see what they wind up doing there and who winds up being like the two returners. And if someone like Tariq or Jakeem Grant, if he gets signed, if they can make the team. Pat Eflin, he's a guy who was here a couple years ago. They need some help in the interior depth wise. And so he's an option for that. I don't know how he, we can't really judge offensive linemen that closely. And we only saw him for 2 days this week. So I don't know how he looks, but he's a veteran. I think they need another interior lineman. So he's someone to keep an eye on. And McKinley, I believe, and I don't have this in front of me, I should, that Jeff Ulbrich might have coached him in Atlanta. He was a first round pick there. I think he has some versatility inside outside, and I think they could use another defensive lineman if they don't believe in whether it's Michael Clemens or these undrafted rookies like Eric Watts. He's a guy that would be intriguing there, especially if he has a good relationship with Jeff. So all three were very intriguing, like late summer veteran tryouts, and I'm curious to see if they sign them either today or this week coming out of those tryouts.
All right. And then big picture, obviously you mentioned it off the top, but this is if there's a slow time in the NFL, we are about to enter it before training camp in late July. Zach, I know you were just traveling. Any travel plans over the next month?
Yes. So tomorrow I head to Lake Tahoe for a bachelor party with my friends. I go back out west again for the third time in a month.
I've never been to Lake Tahoe.
Yeah, me either. I'm excited. Actually, former Jets writer Matt Stipulkowski used to work for NJ.com. It's his bachelor party. Connor couldn't be bothered to go, even though he's invited. He's too big time for his friends. But yeah,
you blame it on the baby.
I mean, but also I'm not that.
Golf. You could golf in Tahoe.
Exactly. Oh, they are golfing. I'm not going on the golf trip, but a group of them are golfing. Although I will say, not having to be trapped with him for a weekend isn't the worst thing, maybe. So I shouldn't complain.
I can only imagine how many Connor.
I do want to see him trapped in a room with Mike Florio at the moment because I think that would be funny.
Oh yeah, if anybody didn't catch that, we won't get into it. But check Twitter.
Just silly stuff. Silly stuff. Yeah, and then I go to Newport Beach also, so I'm going out west quite a bit. Then in August I have a bunch of weddings. So July is going to be a chill month, I think. We'll see, but. If any of our listeners live out in California, let me know and maybe I can maybe we can meet up. I don't know if I have time, but maybe I will for my can't wait listeners.
Yeah, you will.
Yeah, I mean I have the time.
You will.
Yeah, I have the
only thing about meeting up with anybody in LA is like I tell people the story.
No
like
matter what.
I was in LA covering the World Series one year, and a friend of mine was like, "Hey, I'm in LA too. I saw you're in LA." And we were like, yeah, let's get together. And then like he texted me where he was, and I texted him where I was, and it was like, that's like an hour and a half drive. We're both in LA, and this is not going to happen. So that's life in LA. I feel like that happens in New York and you don't even think about it because it's like maybe a subway ride, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Manhattan to Brooklyn, it takes forever, but it's like whatever. But when you're thinking about getting in a car, it's a whole different.
I will say I learned about the difference between us in the East and us in the West.
A lot of differences.
Yeah, a lot of differences. But like, so my girlfriend and I, we like to walk wherever we can. Because most things are walkable in Jersey City and New York, obviously. And we were out visiting some friends in San Diego. We had to drop off the rental car at the rental car place, and then we were walking to our friend's place, which is probably like a 35-minute walk or something like that, like a decent walk, but nice weather out. We're like, why not? Wasn't exactly paved for people to walk that much, but we still were like, we might as well. It's beautiful out. We get to my friend's house. We told them that we walked all the way. They're like, you walked? What did that take you? Like 4 hours? Why would you do that? Like the idea of walking that much just like blows anybody's mind out west, and it always cracks me up.
Yeah, but whatever. I like the walking too.
Yeah.
I during like, I guess when I stopped commuting to work, like I don't take the subway anywhere. I don't own a car. It's all walking. But anyway, all right, that's gonna do it. I think. Anything else you want to throw in here, Zach? We're gonna be back. I guess if there's no crazy Jets stuff, we'll take a little break here from the pod.
Yeah, maybe we'll try and come up with somebody to interview or something like that. Do a fun one in the off season. But yeah, I'd say probably not for a little bit. One thing we didn't hit that I'll just touch on briefly is DJ Reed mentioned at his press conference today that the Jets haven't really talked to him about a new deal. Not surprising. I think they should re-sign him. I'm skeptical that they will, but just something to keep an eye on. And yeah, I think the Reddick thing will be the thing to keep an eye on if anything were to happen this offseason. But yeah, I mean, I hope everybody has a good summer. People who are in school or in education, you got your kids at home or you get some time off. My girlfriend works in education. She actually has to work in the summer at her school, which kind of sucks, but she gets a short break.
That stinks.
But
everyone I know in education now is like principals and superintendents. And so they're like, no, I work all the time. I'm
like, that's so I guess
why are you doing that?
So I have more of a summer break than my girlfriend, which seems kind of unfair considering she's doing actual important work and I'm not. But anyway, I hope everybody.
You're both babysitting in different ways.
She's babysitting me also when she has to come.
Oh, that's
to be fair.
That's true.
But yeah, I mean, yeah. Thank you, everybody, for listening. We'll come back with another one soon. Marissa will be back, and maybe by then we'll be able to say where she was today.
Yeah, I think so. All right, everybody. Thanks.